Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, if you're familiar with some of my older content, I have really worked to talk about why youth shouldn't join gangs and about American drug culture and the prevalence of Hollywood's influence, including the music industry, upon youths who decide to use drugs, and how Islam is a solution for that, and how we need to make it so that our youth don't really admire narcos and other drug dealers, okay? So I want to discuss with you the case of Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, Fito, as he's also called, who's an Ecuadorian narcotraficante, okay? Now, Pablo Escobar, El Chapo Guzman, these are popular names of some of the world's most prominent people, okay? So, Adolfo is from Ecuador, and he traffics in cocaine, firearms, and they do little racketeering of extortions and stuff like that. They also have a network of assassins. And his cartel is called Los Choneros. And he has been the principal leader from 2020 to 2025. And they are partners with the infamous Sinaloa cartel, which is quite powerful in Mexico. And their main customer base is Americans. So I want you to realize how liberals, they say legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs. They want there to be more injection sites so people can freely use drugs like how you would drink a beer at a bar. So if you want to shoot up fentanyl, you want to, get that meth in your system, or make your arms raw from the needles of heroin, have at it until your teeth fall out. They want you to have accommodations so that you can relax and rot your brain away and become even more of a plague to your family and society. Enabling and facilitating the circulation and acceptance of drugs is their goal. Okay? So, with America so divided on drug culture, it is not surprising that there are cartels like Los Choneros and people like Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, Fito. And while it is fascinating that they caught him, it is disturbing to see how many Americans scapegoat the Latin world, shall we say, for the production of drugs while ignoring the customer base. Now, El Chapo Guzman, he had escaped from prison as well. So does Fito here. He did it twice, I believe. So we see why so many narcos, they really fear American prisons. And I'd still argue that American prisons are not really, okay, like I read that book on Rikers. They're not fun. Okay, they're not the Swedish Nordic model, but they are, they stuff you in a place, but it should be a labor camp where you have to serve and be producing something for the country that you're in, so that you don't just become a leech, okay? Using water, using electricity, costing the taxpayer, you should be, building a railroad, learning a skill, farming, something where the prisons can become self-reliant and produce their own products so that they can lower their tax burden. So our prisons are pretty hard to escape from. Pretty hard. So we can see a little bit of a difference here concerning how Ecuador runs their prisons versus us. Okay? Now, Fito was born in Manta, which is a coastal city in the province of Manabí. And the former leader of Los Choneros was Jose Luis Zambrano, a.k.a. Rasquina, and Junior Roldan. Those two people died. They were assassinated, I believe, and he took over. And what's interesting is how short his reign has been before he got caught, and just how much money they were dealing with. And just to be clear, Ecuador has classified the Los Choneros cartel as a terrorist organization, and you can totally see why, okay? But it should be clear. Now, I do understand why some people want to label some cartels as terrorist organizations, but when America does that, it's because they want to invade and do drone strikes, and that causes quite a lot of problems. Now, the thing is, if cartels that sell drugs are considered terrorist organizations, that should logically mean that anyone buying their products is aiding and abetting terrorism. Because if you were to go to a terror group and buy their products, which puts money in their pockets, you would be facilitating their ability to maintain power. So if you're an American junkie, you buying the products of these cartels, these terror organizations, should be treated the same. You should be condemned and you should be punished. Because you're not allowed to support a terror group. You're not allowed to give money to a terror group. So buying drugs is giving money to terror groups. That's plain as. And another thing is that the cartel was started in the 1990s, and they made a lot of headway in prisons. So when you think about how our prisons are so dysfunctional in America as well, that when people go to prison, they have to join a gang usually in order to survive, and those gangs are usually built upon a racial identity. So you have the Aryan Peckerwoods, you have black supremacists, then you have the Norteños and Sureños of the Latino culture, and then you got some triads. You know, the different demographics will have their gangs in those prisons, right? So we're not stomping out gangs, but rather we're giving them more people, because they're sitting around all day, locked inside, they have nothing to do but talk and recruit. If they were busy working, picking cherries, making license plates, having to do something with their hands, and they're being patrolled with armed guards, they wouldn't have as much leisure time. They wouldn't have as much ability to talk and use drugs and mount each other. They would have to actually be useful. So when you look at Los Choneros and how they really use pardon me, the prisons to their advantage, that's something to be noted, okay? When a prison warden and the prison guards, the corrections officers, lose a handle and a grip on the inmates and they start making up their own rules, well, then we see we got a problem. And shows like Orange is the New Black, I think, did a lot of damage to the American psyche about the nature of prisons and what's the purpose of them. And you want there to be some humanity, but at the same time, you want there to be some utility and punishment as well. So the balance of that, I think, is extremely important. Because humans are a resource, and humans have energy. And we need to maximize as much energy as possible from said humans. The prison he was in, one of them was called La Regional Prison, and he had a lot of special privileges. I read in some reports there was rooster fighting. I don't know if I believe that, because how you gonna get some chickens in there? I mean, is Ecuador that crazy, that wild, that corrupt? But he was able to have liquor and basically have ceramics in his bathroom area. You know, privileges that you're not supposed to have there. But you have to remember, they also bribe the prison guards, and they have quite a hold on the population. As in, if you don't do this, we'll do the X, Y, and Z to your family. So some rinky-dink corrections officer who's barely making ends meet in the poor country of Ecuador gets some money flashed in his face and an AK, well, he's gonna sing a different tune, isn't he? And it's not surprising to see that there's some corruption in the corrections facilities. Now, in America, you'll get female officers who will sleep with the male inmates, which is pretty crazy, which is another reason why women shouldn't be working in prisons. I mean, they can work in the female side, but in male prisons, they just don't belong there, because some people are able to be compromised more than others. And some women like the bad boys. And weak men who don't have any moral principles are also going to get corrupted by these large cartel forces. Okay? So it was just fascinating to just see how many narcos are able to have luxury in prisons, and how many of them fear being extradited to the United States, where obviously you can't have those kinds of privileges, right? And so at least that's one thing that America is doing right, is not allowing as many privileges in prisons. Although, when you look at Norway, Denmark, Sweden, their prison models, they have the soft rehabilitation angle, and you have to just think, I don't know if that's how it should be. And then you look at El Salvador, how they were putting their inmates to work. They have a gulag, right? Gulag style, but they're also making those people learn something. And I shared not too long ago Nayib Bukele's post where the inmates are sewing, which is great, make them do something. But liberals, progressives, and some Democrats and leftists argue that slave labor unfair and inhumane. Meanwhile, those people, when they were on the outside, terrorized hardworking people and ruined communities. So it's really strange that they would get such a soft spot for those individuals, but what do you expect? Now, he graduated with a lawyer degree from prison, a law degree. So he's in there being busy learning how to argue, which I found to be interesting, because some people can earn degrees in prison, but you wonder, who's going to hire you? But I think he learned that so that he could, fleece and floss the law. And what's clever about him as well is that he had been able to hide for 18 months. The manhunt was on for him. He got to breathe fresh air, and it took them 18 months to kind of find out where he was. So that's a pretty decent stretch. That's over a year. And that means the people were also hush-hush around him, because I'm pretty sure there was a fat bounty on him, but no one wanted to turn him in, which highlights an age-old dilemma of the people themselves supporting the cartels more than law enforcement and their government. And you can see the divide rise between legitimate forms of government and militia, mafia, vigilante type of groups. His home is quite luxurious in Manabi, the province of Manabi, and was quite a large villa with a gym and pool, and there were still some areas under construction. But he's living pretty good, although the currency of Ecuador is lower than America's, so it's not exactly like your dollar isn't going to stretch. No, it's going to stretch over there. And when they went to get him, they shut down a 15-block radius so that they could do the raid, because they didn't want him to escape. So it really is reminiscent of how these narcos build a large villa, they get all their amenities, and then it gets raided. And, you gotta wonder, why would they not focus more on building certain hideouts? When you compare how the Italian mafia would have hideouts where when you want to go dark, you have some places where you live and no one knows where you are, and you're gonna stay there for a while and lay low, and you have the bare bones of stuff, and it's more tricky. But then if you look at how some of these narcos do, some of them think they can just be wanted and then prance about their villa, and then no one's going to come and find them, which is quite strange. Now, the house also contained a camouflage hole in the floor that led to a bunker that even had air conditioning, so I found that to be interesting. A secret passage and underground bunkers in a villa is important, but he obviously didn't camouflage it well enough. But when you think about how in the past, like there's like these castles with secret passageways, or some houses have a safety room, you can see how the cartels have also adopted that model of having a room to retreat to. And air conditioning is quite luxurious. I mean, you're gonna need it, you know, to be roasting down there like a sardine, you know what I mean? Now, he had a crop field with a secret bunker, and there were the government boots, we'll call them, were using their excavators, digging through. You know, something off with this crop field here. So they start digging, and Fito is hiding in this underground bunker. He knows he has to pop out, because if he doesn't, he's going to be entombed alive. He's going to be buried alive, because as the soil gets disturbed, things can cave in, get sketchy. He'll lose oxygen, lose power, and he'll be trapped inside, and most likely no one's going to come and rescue him. Cartel business is quite dirty. They'll probably just leave him in there and rob his house blind and steal all his money. No true friends in the cartel, as they say. And so he pops out and runs out, and that's how they get him. You know, it's like pop goes the weasel, the jack in the box. You know, so they're doing a little bit of underground this, underground that in their and their designs of how they live. He is now in the maximum security La Roca prison, which is located in the Guayaquil prison complex. And the leader, the president of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa, wants him to be extradited to America. Now, I'm very curious who pays for that. Does Ecuador pay America to house him? Or do the American taxpayers pay for that? You know, is there a deal? What are we doing over here, right? But also, if you think about the risk, having someone like that come to America, they can teach people in the prison how to better do operations, and can drop a lot of knowledge and be seen as a hero. Be seen as a badass, and bragging rights. People get out of prison. Oh, I was locked up with the infamous Narco of Ecuador, yada yada. Do we want to have such heroes? Because remember, liberals want to stop solitary confinement, and so do progressives. They say it's inhumane, and for the mentally ill, I'd argue it's inhumane, but you just have to be careful and really watch somebody who has that much charisma. Because surely, with how much he's been around death, women, violence, he's got a certain aura about him that will influence the inmates around him. And he can still be a shot caller from prison and start operations in America, and then get stuff on his commissary on his books, as other Italian mobsters, Irish, and so on and so forth have done in the past. So we have to be careful bringing someone like that to America. The Choneros cartel united smaller gangs under their banner in order to build up their criminal federation. They did this and ended up dominating the prison system. So they collectivized smaller factions and brought them under their control. So talk about that, smart, swallowing up the little factions and then, having them under an umbrella bureaucracy. So you can see how sophisticated some of them became. And they used the prisons as operation bases. So when I argue for prisons to be made stricter, them to be put to work, you can see how you can maximize prisons as a whole, and how we can cut back on allowing gangs to manipulate that system in their favor. Now, Ecuador, clearly, they don't have as much control over their inmates as America does, but gangs still run wild in American prisons. And while Trump is targeting the guy picking avocados and the illegal lady who's cleaning the hotel rooms so you don't have bed bugs there, he's not focusing on prison gangs. And he's not doing prison reform. He's not building better prisons with updated technology. And if you recall, I mentioned that we should chip each inmate with a chip that identifies them and that it has a GPS tracker so they can never escape. And so that when we put them to work, even if they were to jump the fence or take out a guard, you send a robot dog, you send a drone, and you eliminate them, and you make it so that they cannot just run away like that. For the violent ones. I'm not talking about people who they didn't pay a traffic fine, or maybe they stole too much from Macy's. There's different laws, right, that are broken, and you're like, I can forgive that. But I'm talking about brutally evil, vindictive, deadly people having different laws, okay? And so that would be a good solution for them, because seeing the Choneros cartel create a criminal federation and having the prisons be their operation bases, you can see that clearly some countries, they're not good at controlling their wicked ones. But America also, sure, those criminals can escape, but they are still very smart in how they smuggle drugs in and out. I recall there was a black guy, his white girlfriend came to see him. They smuggled drugs onto the child, and she passed the child to him. And then the camera was capturing how he took the drugs out of the child's sock or something. So, or pregnant women putting balloons of drugs in their, area. Very depraved stuff. So, we have to crack down, and we have to get serious about having law and order. And how do you clean up the prisons, and how do you make sure that they don't get out of hand. Now, the Choneros, they chose that name because they originated from the Manabi town of Chon in the 1990s, and their first leader was Jorge Bismarck Valiz España, aka Teniente España. So, they're not even really that old, and already their leaders are being taken out. So you can see how, yeah, they're getting money, they're getting paid, but they were not able to stick around very long, which is good for the people of Ecuador, but clearly they're not as smart and sophisticated as they think they are. And with how many people brag on social media that they're part of this or that, flexing their wealth, it isn't too hard for them to get found out and infiltrated. They were also doing a lot of extortion rackets. In the movie The Equalizer 3 with Denzel Washington, they did a great job of capturing how the Catholic Italian mafia was extorting the people in that little town, and how Denzel's character went about getting justice for those people, and how those mafia members really were horrible to the people who lived there in Altamonte, I believe it was. And in the Equalizer 1, the Latino security guard's mom has a taqueria, and a corrupt police are extorting her and stuff, and they cause a fire in order to make her pay. And then in Equalizer 3, the mafia burns this guy's, I think he's from the Middle East, because there was a character named Khalid there, but they burn his fish shop because he can't pay. And they also, before they burn it, they smush his face into the ice and give him a beating in order to get money. So cartels and mafias and gangs do extortion rackets. So Los Choneros has that tradition as well. And it is quite sad when innocent people are preyed upon by the extortion rackets. I want to bring your attention to the movie The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matthew McConaughey, and the movie Scarface. Because while we can sit here and wag our fingers and say, you know, how dare Americans, you know, be surprised that somebody got locked up or something for drugs, we have to realize that America, with their free speech in terms of Hollywood, in terms of artistic expression, have facilitated Hollywood's ability to really brainwash young people into thinking drugs are cool. And I keep making the case that you can't get rid of cartels, can't get rid of mafias and drugs while you promote those things to the youth. And when you have a lot of fatherless homes and there's no guidance and there's not too many spiritually wise people who are genuine, we're going to see more and more people turn to Hollywood. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. You know, we see that time and time again. Okay? Now, The Wolf of Wall Street is a little bit different because it shows a certain class of drug users. Instead of the black person smoking crack behind KFC, we see polished white guys snorting coke like there's no mañana, okay? And Matthew McConaughey's character openly in a restaurant snorts coke and then talks about how Leonardo should choke his chicken, as we'll say, twice a day in order to have more relaxation because they're dealing with numbers and stuff all day. Now, Islam tells us to stay sober. We are commanded to be sober. Men are encouraged not to constantly have their hands in their pants. And Islam has the solution to fix Hollywood culture and the intoxicant culture of America. Whereas secular liberal atheists say legalize, tax, regulate all drugs, allow Hollywood to create any kind of movie they want, regardless of the consequences, allow people to safely use drugs at injection sites, don't regulate bars, just let it all hang out, let everything get wild, loose, and crazy. And then we see cartels rise up and facilitate the orders that Americans demand. Okay? And so, it's incumbent upon us to realize in order to change the culture, we must demand that Hollywood create different films, but also for people to have independent films as well. And I think that's where AI is going to come in. And AI can be a great tool to allow independent content creators to create their own movies. And it will get better and better with time. And there'll be more budgets. But I do think it's important for Muslims who have wealth to create movies that are halal, that are permissible, and that can motivate people, because it's true. People do look to popular films and adopt ideas and behaviors more than we would like to admit. And so, one of the classic films is The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio and Matthew McConaughey. And they promote partying, drugs, and fornication. So we can't be too surprised when someone like Fito in Ecuador is facilitating that product for American consumers. Now, one of the most famous movies about cocaine, which is something that this particular cartel was dealing in, Los Choneros, was the movie Scarface. Al Pacino. Classic. He's sitting at the table and he's snorting that coke away. And we can see how his drug consumption habit really knocked him off of his game. And how drugs destroy people and make you paranoid, and you do things you're not supposed to, and you're not rational, and you don't become strong anymore. And so, with films like The Wolf of Wall Street and Scarface being very popular, we get to see how Americans have had a long history with cocaine in general, but also drug culture. And that when people wear shirts of Scarface, there's this almost subliminal messaging of a narco, of a drug dealer. Okay? And how many young men have really adopted that character? Have really made it part of their persona and looked up to someone like that? Tony Montana. Say, oh, you want to F with me? Come say hello to my little friend. Like, you can think of some of the most famous quotes. He was an immigrant who was a dishwasher and then became rich, selling, the devil's dandruff, they call it. Come on now. We have to think about what we're doing here, okay? Now, in the 1980s, America had 5.8 million Americans using it. And obviously, there's going to be even more because not everyone got caught using it. But the cocaine cowboy era, the 1980s, Miami, all that. Like, the 80s was the cocaine era. From the 60s and 70s, you had psychedelics, cannabis. The 90s was like, you had some people mixing in scissor, so codeine and weed, but cough syrups type of weird things going on. It was a mess. Okay, Hennessy. You would see people go to Cancun, Mexico, and then live it up, and MTV would show it. So drug culture has always been around, but each era has something different. And the 80s is a classic time period of cocaine. And you can tell by the music that was popular during that time, bunch of cokeheads. It's intense. And so, Americans, when they say today, we need to go to war with Mexico, oh, the immigrants are bringing the drugs in. No, you need to stop scapegoating. Americans gobble drugs like goats gobble grass. And so if you want to stop that, you have to stop Americans from using drugs. And that's another whole arena. How do you get Americans to stop altering their consciousness? Islam has the solution, which is forbidding it, and through practicing Islamic spirituality authentically from the Quran and Sunnah and applying what you've learned and adopting the rules, you'll become steadfast and stoic and persistent upon the one path to paradise. This will help strengthen you, inshallah, against the urge to get high and escape your own consciousness. Now, fentanyl is mixed often today with cocaine, and this is leading to a lot of overdoses. So, having conversations with your children about, hey, you gotta watch out for this drug and that drug, and this is what it does, is important because fentanyl is really getting out of hand. And for a time there was crocodile, flocka, crack cocaine. Now we see fentanyl, a very powerful painkiller, which is used in epidurals to a small degree, is getting popularity. And we need to be mindful of that. That Americans are constantly seeking not to be in reality. So American culture creates the drug addict, and we have to really examine that if we want to help people be more healthier and bring down the cartels. Now, when you're talking to your kids or your loved one who might be dabbling into drugs, you can remind them that cocaine causes irreversible brain damage. It also disrupts one's dopamine pathways, which cause cognitive deficiencies and can cause a reduction in one's gray matter volume. So, when a liberal or a libertarian is like, you should just do whatever you want, the government has no right to regulate what you put in your body, take a step back and remind them, this is hurting people's health. Oh, well, if sugar is allowed, if coffee is allowed, they'll say, well, why can't this? Well, cocaine is a lot different than having an espresso with a croissant. Okay? Much different. And I have shared in the past how painful it is to have parents who were junkies. And recently, my dad, he's been using drugs for a long time. Okay? Well, probably, because his youngest drug use started in high school. And he's like 60 or something now. So he's been using it for years, and he's not sharp anymore. And I had told him some good news. And I knew he was high when I told him. I can just tell. And when I talked to him again and I mentioned it, he was high again, and he didn't remember what I said. And it was something really important for my life, and he didn't remember. And that kind of pain is hurt. You can't describe it unless you've dealt with it. You want to have a dad who's protective, sober, helps you, can be your hero. But when you have a dad who likes drugs, no, you become the parent to your parent. It's a miserable existence. And so that irreversible brain damage, the mindset that comes along with using drugs, is jarring. And so Bill Maher, Kyle Kalinske, Joe Rogan, and others who promote drug consumption, Ari Shaffir, Tom Segura, these are people who, they don't give a damn about how it breaks apart families and how so many young women who have dads who are like that and moms who are like that will truly have their life kneecapped because they're not able to have parents around who can aid them in this world. And that's a tragedy. And so we wonder why so many women are aborting. Why are so many women not wanting to have kids? Well, go ahead and examine how many would have more children if they just had the support system they needed, and then how conservatives say cut food programs. If you don't have this, don't have a kid. You don't have that, don't have a kid. And you're like, okay, then don't complain about the collapsing population and birth rates. Because the nuclear family gets destroyed with the promotion of drugs, and responsible women are not going to have kids who they can't have a proper support system for. And so if we want women to be able to feel safe to have children, we need to keep families intact. And keeping families intact means keeping families sober. Now, there is a very interesting list I want to share with you that I compiled, and I wanted to get into how many celebrities have been caught using cocaine and drugs. And they are responsible for keeping the drug lifestyle alive. And America promotes them, allows them to get rich, and the population sees these people use drugs. And this is how the drug lifestyle of America is continued. So Robert Downey Jr., Lindsay Lohan, Whitney Houston, Tim Allen, which is surprising because he seems so wholesome, Demi Lovato, Johnny Depp, not so surprising, Whoopi Goldberg, Alec Baldwin, Bradley Cooper, Stephen King. Kodak Black, Mary Kate Olsen, Elton John, Sigmund Freud. Those are just some of the people who are famous who actively used drugs and got busted for it. And so they got the money to keep those cartel guys in business. So Fito is set up as the bad guy, which he is. Islamically, he's definitely a bad person. Okay, spreading intoxicants and corruption in the land, spreading fitna. But we have to look at his customers, don't we? Have to look at his customers because they're not innocent at all. Now, you've heard me talk about how Islam says music is haram. And I've gotten into a lot of spats over this because some people, they don't want to admit, yes, music's haram, but I love it anyways. No, they like to dance around and be like, that's not sahih. Because they don't want to admit they have an addiction to music. And people like to be one-sided. Oh, Chopin and Vivaldi, they make me relax. Oh, but music that's aggressive and violent and talks about intoxicants and sin is not, it doesn't impress me at all. It doesn't have any impact on me. Only the positive music has an impact on my on my consciousness and my psychology. You're like, no, you're wrong. Okay? Now, we know when you sit down and you realize, okay, if I give up music for a month, I'll change how I feel. And then when you're addicted to music, you get angry when you can't play it. You're driving, you feel like you have to have it before work to pump you up. You notice in campaign ads, they gotta have this cringe, epic music to kind of get you motivated with what the politician is saying. You know, it's a manipulative tool, okay? And you can do this by just taking an evil person, changing the soundtrack behind him, and then you can see like, oh, you know, music is definitely a tool of manipulation. And music takes you away from the remembrances of Allah because it fills your head with a bunch of mantras that don't belong there. How many times have reverts, I wonder, who tried to give up music, they just hear random songs come in. Like, I'll get random ones once in a blue moon of like, there was something in the air that night, the stars so bright, Orlando, like some stupid song from the 70s. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I'll just have these random hooks that pop in, and then you have to be like, okay, I gotta listen to more Dickard. Get that out of my head, right? But it's fascinating how that music stays in your brain, and then you're thinking about it over and over, earning no good deeds, when instead you could be doing Dickard, remembrances of Allah, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, you name it, Subhana Rabbi Alim, getting rewarded instead. But you can't do that if your brain's focusing on hooks. So who are some rappers who glorify drug use in their lives and music? So the most prominent ones are Jay-Z, Notorious B.I.G., Pusha T, Raekwon, Young Jeezy, Rick Ross, Future, Lil Wayne, one of the worst, 3 6 Mafia, Pimp C, DJ Screw, Lil Pump, Lil Xan, Mac Miller, Nicki Minaj, Doja Cat, Glorilla, Cardi B, Sexy Red, Ice Spice. Now this also includes their music videos. Okay? These are some of the... Snoop Dogg is giant pothead. But no matter which, there's so many rappers too. We can't name them all. Chicano rappers, corridos perrones, there's reggaeton, there's a lot of music. Okay, country music pushes whiskey, cocaine, and tobacco. You know, liver cancer or throat cancer, take your pick. You know, because tobacco causes lung cancer, throat cancer, liver failure from alcoholism is a problem. Glenn Beck is a popular Christian, and his face is bloated from alcoholism, and he was addicted to alcohol. And so you have a lot of Christians who struggle with alcoholism, and they listen to country music, and country music is totally ridiculous music. It manipulates you. Oh, she left me and I'm sad and I'm driving my truck and my horse is dead. And then they got like a big titty chick with like Daisy Duke shorts on, and oh, you're Christian, but you're, thirst trapping, and these music videos with a cross between your tits. Yeah, it's so spiritual, So, rap isn't the only music that promotes degeneracy. And so many musicians, they get rewarded for their music with groupies, Even Christian singers, they get tons of bimbos flaunting themselves, throwing themselves at these men who have to like shove them away. There's something about women and musicians that just makes them go crazy. So, America promotes through movies and music drug use. And American celebrities use drugs. So, we must not scapegoat the drug dealers entirely. They are fulfilling the demand of Americans. So Americans are more to blame because they are the ones who buy the product. And they ache for it, they itch for it. And it's quite sad. Now, there's some politicians who've been caught. We know countless of these politicians are using drugs, but just a few that are public are Marion Barry, former mayor of Washington, D.C., Trey Riddell, former U.S. representative of Florida, Jack Camp, former senior judge, U.S. District Court for Northern District, Georgia, Frederick Richmond, former U.S. representative, New York, Mel LeBlanc, former Arlington, Texas city council member and deputy mayor. And we do have to sit here and realize, from politicians to celebrities to musicians, actors, musicians, and then as well in the adult entertainment industry, a lot of these people are juiced to the gills on intoxicants. And then in the podcast realm, people are doing podcasts while popping Percocets, smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, snorting coke. And then the stand-up comedians, we see that, okay, American culture evolves around getting high. And when you have an entire political parties, libertarians, liberals, leftists, progressives, and Democrats, who are trying to make it so that there's more injection sites where people can get high, and to decriminalize possession, we're itching towards more and more people removing the stigma of drug use, but also making it easier for people to use drugs. And then we'll think about our healthcare system. So America has crap food with polluted water, our air is becoming more polluted, and then pushing intoxicants. Obviously our population is going to be very sick, and then they're going to go in debt for medical stuff. Because remember, medical bankruptcy is one of the top bankruptcies in the United States. So they're enabling drug use that will eventually ruin the health of their own population. And there is a famous quote by Duterte, former leader of the Philippines, where he talked about, you're trying to kill my country by allowing drugs. And he was super harsh on drug consumers and dealers, and I really admired him for that. Liberals freaked out, said it was oppressive and totalitarian. He put the green light on so many of those producers and consumers, but it cleaned up a lot of the streets, and I think it's wonderful that he took a zero tolerance approach to that industry and those clientele base people. So I think we should have something like that in America. But Trump is going after the ladies vacuuming hotel rooms, nannies who are here illegally, somebody picking cherries, somebody doing roofing. He's targeting them, sending his Gestapo after them. And then the same people are like, we shouldn't have a war on drugs. It's failed. It doesn't work. Oh, prohibition. But then if you look at prohibition, they said, well, we should be safer so that people were getting poisoned because they were creating moonshine in their bathtubs. And so now if you go to a grocery store or a restaurant, alcohol is everywhere, more than it ever was back during Prohibition. And you have more people driving drunk, more babies being born with fetal alcohol syndrome, more teenagers getting R-worded because they're wasted. Okay? Alcohol has become a plague upon society, and it's a slow, agonizing death, and it's advertised on Pinterest, on Instagram. People think it's classy. Like, it's ridiculous, the marketing propaganda around how bourgeoisie, posh, and fun it is to get wasted. And then you see people like Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley who just become drunkards, and they ruin their life, and they cheat on their wives, and they're just miserable people. You can see, like, well, alcohol is definitely a slippery slope. It's a social lubricant, and it breaks apart the chains of loyalty upon the family. And children have suffered immensely by alcohol being legal and prevalent in society because their parents get shit-faced. The dad beats the mom beats the kid. You know, people shooting each other, they can't hold their tempers. The amount of STDs passed while people are drunk is horrendous. Alcohol is a true burden on society, and I don't believe a God would permit its people to use something that makes you less shy, less bashful, erodes your memories, harms your liver, and makes you want to have sex and cheat. It's not a good thing at all for society. And I have shared many times how I have watched people die from alcoholism, and my grandma had 2 sisters die from alcoholism and pills. I had 2 alcoholic stepmoms, 1 overdosed and died with pills and alcohol. I had an alcoholic stepdad. I'm so tired of trying to make certain people who love alcohol understand how their entire existence is a burden on people around them. From junkies to alcoholics, those people are straight burdens. Trying to argue with them, reason with them, they lie, they steal, they're conniving, they'll always try to fleece you for money. They're just permanently damaged, broken, and some people get sober, but they're always like a Christopher Moltisanti, just waiting to relapse. And then when they relapse, it's like, oh, here we go again. So preventing it from even getting started is important. And so I've argued that Hollywood should be regulated, no more drugs, no more alcohol in movies. Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter should not be allowed to have alcohol ads, okay? We need to do something. And then, so that's a nanny state. We have a duty to our fellow people to promote what is healthy. Because if Christians have like the sheep for their people, there's talk of certain people being like cattle in the Quran, because they just have no sense about them. If you look at how all the prophets were, like, from my understanding, nearly all of them, they dealt with animals. And when someone deals with animals, they have to know how to shepherd a mass, how to lead, how to be gentle, how to be firm, how to protect a flock from predators. Drug dealers are predators, and drug users are predators. Let's not forget. They will do terrible things. You're not allowed to record, but if you ever get a chance to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, you're going to hear some sob stories. But you're also going to hear women who did terrible things to their family members while they were high. And meth is very terrifying. And Breaking Bad was a good show. But it did kind of make you feel like that's a pathway to get some mad money. And we have to remember, we need to think about the hereafter. We need to think about our deeds. Getting money for this dunya isn't going to last. And one of the biggest appeals for narcotraficantes, for drug dealers, is that you get money, hoes, and luxury here and now, fast, doing it. And then you see people wanting materialism ostentatious pompery. They want to be like a Jeff Bezos by any means necessary in terms of net worth. And this isn't good. And Elon Musk also being on a cocktail of drugs. It's quite sad. And Joe Rogan having on Joey Diaz and others who promote getting lost in the sauce. It's not healthy for a young man either. So, this narco has been caught. But another one will rise up because America has a culture of drugs. And Americans make drug dealers. And America, because of the amount of drugs they consume, keeps up the cartels' ability to terrorize populations and make the world a sicker place, because Americans care more about getting high than the communal good. Okay? Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and join the blog.